If your eSignature evaluation started with a G2 review or a feature checklist, you've already set yourself up for a bad implementation. Not because those tools are wrong in general, but because eSignature isn't a feature problem. It's a process problem. And a feature checklist doesn't test your process. It just confirms the vendor has buttons. Most teams go into this the same way. Someone says, we just need basic eSign. The team pulls up a comparison table, checks off mobile signing and Salesforce integration, watches a demo where everything works perfectly, and picks the tool with the best UI. 6 months later, a deal closes on an outdated template. Finance cannot confirm which version was approved, and legal is looking at a signed document that they've never seen before. That's not bad luck. That's what happens when you evaluate a workflow enforcement tool like it's a photo editing app. A photo editing app has no opinion about what you do next. An eSignature tool sitting inside a live business process controls who can send what and who has to approve it, which version of a clause the signer actually sees, and what your systems record when it's done. You're not buying signatures, you're buying workflow enhancement and evidence. So instead of shopping features, you need to pressure test 3 specific areas before you watch a single demo: workflow enforcement, integration reliability, and audit evidence. These aren't product categories. They are the 3 places where vague process assumptions turn into real operational failures. Workflow enhancement tells you whether the tool actually controls what happens or it just hosts files. Integration reliability tells you whether your systems stay in sync or slowly drift into conflicting records. Audit evidence tells you whether you can prove what happened when someone disputes it. What business processes are you actually trying to control? Because a document isn't the real unit of work here. The real unit of work is a specific agreement type at a specific risk level with a specific set of people and systems that have to touch it before it leaves your building. A sales order, an NDA, an employment offer all end with a signature box, and sometimes multiple signature boxes. That's where the similarity stops. A sales order starts on a Salesforce opportunity, pulls pricing from maybe the quote, might need a finance counter signature, and the signed copy has to attach back to the same opportunity record in Salesforce. An NDA might start on an account or a contact record. It routes through legal for template review, and the output goes into a contract repository. An employment offer is HR owned. It draws from a completely separate template library. It requires identity verification, and the signed document lives in your HR system, not your CRM at all. Same signature box, completely different processes, different users, and different templates and different records. If you don't have a clear understanding of those differences before the demo will look smooth and your process will stay vague. You'll go live with a tool that handles one use case cleanly and quietly breaks the rest. At some point in every evaluation, someone says, it's just a simple signature. To a sales rep, simple means no legal review. To legal, it means approved templates only. To finance, it means the correct entity and the correct payment terms. To HR, it means documented consent tied to a specific candidate record. Everyone nods because the word keeps the meeting moving, and then the tool faithfully executes that false clarity across the next 100 documents. So before you start any vendor conversation, you need to map each use case. Who initiates it? Which template it uses? Which records it touches in your CRM or your HR system? Which approvals are required? And where the signed output has to land. Does it go into SharePoint, the user's desktop, someone's inbox, Salesforce, something else? That mapping becomes your pressure test. Once you have it, your workflow enforcement questions start getting very specific. Ask where a user can route around the process. If a sales rep downloads the PDF and gets it signed over email, the opportunity never gets the finance countersignature it was supposed to have. If someone pulls an old NDA from a shared drive, legal's review gate gets skipped entirely. And now there's a document on an account record that nobody in legal has seen. What happens if an HR coordinator forwards an offer as a plain email attachment? The signed copy never makes it back to the candidate record, and the documented consent simply doesn't exist. If the vendor's answer to any of that is users shouldn't do that, the tool didn't enforce your process. It just hosted a file. Once you know the process that you're trying to enforce, the next failure shows up in the plumbing. Once you know which processes you're enforcing, the next question is whether the tool can actually stay connected to the systems that process runs through. And this is where I see another common mistake, where companies ask, does it integrate with Salesforce? And they check that box without going any further. Yes, a native Salesforce integration matters, but it integrates is not the same as it integrates correctly for your specific process. I'm going to use Salesforce as the example because it's the most common case, but the same questions apply to any other system that you're connecting to. Most eSignature tools look fine in isolation. The envelope goes out, the signer clicks, the PDF lands somewhere, and the demo ends with applause. The real cost shows up in the handoffs, because the moment a human has to retype a name, a price, or a start date from one system into another, you've already split the record into two versions that will eventually disagree. Start with your source of truth inside of Salesforce. Which object owns the data? Is it the opportunity, the account, or something else? And what happens when values conflict between records? If a salesperson updates a legal name on the account, but the opportunity still holds the old value, you need to know which one the document pulls from and whether or not anyone will catch the discrepancy before the signer does. Then you need to map the trigger points. What specific event in Salesforce creates that outbound document, and what specific event closes the loop back into the same record? Does the document go out automatically when the opportunity stage changes? Do you want the sales rep should manually kick off the sending of that document? If an approved quote doesn't automatically kick off from the agreement, someone is downloading and uploading files manually just to get the thing sent. And that's a wide open window for the wrong version to go out. When the document is sent out for signature and not yet signed, should something in Salesforce indicate that it's pending? When the document is fully signed, should the opportunity stage get changed to something else? On the back end, a status of signed means nothing if the opportunity still shows the deal as a draft, and your onboarding workflow never starts. Get specific about what data mapping you need before you agree to anything. Which Salesforce fields must sync? What validation needs to run before the document gets sent out for signing? And what happens when a required field is blank or contains an incorrect, outdated value? Ideally, the tool should block the send rather than let a document go out with an empty entity name that someone patches in later. When your internal business rules aren't met, you want a clear error, not a silent insertion of your bad data that shows up 3 weeks later during a revenue review. This is also where meaning distortion becomes expensive. Salesforce might record signed. Your finance system says executed, and a compliance log says approved. Sales treats the signature as permission to start provisioning. Finance waits for an executed status before recognizing revenue. Your integration picks one label and then propagates it everywhere, and suddenly you're shipping a product on an agreement that was not fully authorized, or booking revenue against a document that's still missing 2 additional required signatures. Ask the vendor, what happens when the Salesforce sync fails? Does it queue and retry, or does it drop silently? What are your business rules if the document isn't signed within 48 hours or 3 months? Should the document expire at all, or does the customer have years to decide that they're ready to sign it? Who is responsible for tracking the documents that are still pending signatures? Who appears as the sender of these documents that go out for signature? Is it the account manager, the sales leader, the CEO, the Salesforce admin? Will the recipient recognize the name of the person listed as the sender of the document? When integration works correctly, your systems stay in sync and the process runs without anyone manually stitching records together. But clean synchronization only solves half the problem. Because at some point, someone is going to dispute something. A signer claims they never saw that clause. A manager says they never approved that version. That's when the question stops being, did the data land in the right place? And starts being, can you actually prove what happened? That's what the next section is about. You see, your integration was set up to automatically send the document to the primary contact on the Salesforce opportunity. No one flagged that the primary contact was an old procurement coordinator who'd been replaced 6 months ago. The actual decision maker received a forwarded copy, signed it from their personal email address, and the deal closed. 3 months later, the customer disputes the payment terms, and their legal team points out that the person who signed was not authorized to bind the company. Your audit trail shows the envelope went to one person and was signed by someone else entirely, with no delegation record, no identity verification on the second signer, and no approval chain connecting them to the authority to execute. That's the moment many eSignature tools fall apart, and almost nobody tests for it during an evaluation. Don't ask the vendor if they have an audit trail. Every vendor will say yes. Ask what the trail actually captures. Who acted, which version of the document they saw, when they acted, and what method was used to verify their identity. If you can't answer those 4 questions, you don't have evidence. You have a file. Before you talk to a single vendor, Your organization needs to answer questions that have nothing to do with the software. Is delegation allowed? And if so, under what conditions and for which agreement types? What compliance standard applies? And can you name the specific control you would point to in an audit? How long do signed documents need to be stored? And what format does your legal team need for export? If you can't answer those internally, the vendor's defaults are going to answer them for you. And vendor defaults are built for the average customer, not for your process. Once you've defined your own rules, run a simulation, not of the perfect ideal use case, but the ones that will lead to litigation and finger pointing in the future. Pick a signed document, simulate a challenge, and ask whether you can pull the version history, the identity proof, and the approval chain without reconstructing it from screenshots across 4 different systems. That drill tests the vendor and your own internal rules at the same time. The tool that gives you a clean, unarguable record turns agreements into assets. The tool that makes you piece the story together under pressure turns them into liabilities. Think about buying a car. Most people don't walk into a dealership lot without knowing something about their situation first. Do you need to haul equipment or commute 40 miles a day or fit 3 car seats in the back? Those answers determine the category before you even compare models or read a review or test drive anything. Someone who needs a truck doesn't get talked into a sedan because the heated seats were impressive. eSignature works the same way. Before you look at feature lists or watch a demo or read a G2 review, you need to sit down internally and define your own use cases. Which agreement types are you actually signing? Who initiates each one? Which systems have to be involved? What are your rules around delegation, compliance, and retention? Those answers tell you which category of tool you need and which requirements are non-negotiable before you even open a browser tab. Once you have that, workflow enforcement, integration reliability, and even audit evidence stop being abstract evaluation criteria. They become the checklist that you bring into every vendor conversation, the must-haves that the tool either meets or doesn't. Everything else is a nice-to-have. The platform will automate whatever your process leaves vague. So define the process first. Subscribe if you want more decision integrity breakdowns like this one. And drop a comment below. What's something that surprised you when your team was evaluating or rolling out an eSignature tool? Not looking to call anyone out, just curious what caught people off guard. The patterns are usually more common than people think.